Good afternoon, everybody. It's Friday the 5th of June, and thank you for joining us on this Thank Furlough. It's Friday, I think we're calling this one, as there's a new regime about to hit us. And I'm really pleased today that I have got Jacquie Mount here again. Everybody loves to hear what she's got to say, but I have the added bonus on this Thank Furlough. It's Friday, that we have another expert with us, and that is Hema Mistry. Hello, Hema.
Hello, everybody.
Hema is from Quest, which is the organisation that ICB uses for those bits of advice which are not bookkeeping technical. They go a bit beyond that. So if you ring up for your free legal helpline, this goes through the Quest. And Hema will tell us a little bit about herself in a second, but she's here to talk about the challenging HR world in which we find ourselves at the moment. So Hema, just tell us a little bit about yourself so everybody knows who you are.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm Hema and I work for Quest Business Services. I'm head of operations, so I look after the team who provide the legal and the employment and the health and safety advice to yourselves. I've been with the company for probably about 15 years now, so there's a lot of changes that we've been through recently as well. But right now we're going through probably our biggest challenge, and that is trying to navigate through the whole coronavirus crisis. So it's a really interesting time for everybody.
So you're going to start, you're going to kick us off today. You're going to talk to us about what your specialism is and where you're coming into this. So that's furloughs, holidays, redundancy, all of those easy to deal with problems that we're having at the moment. And then Jackie's going to mop up afterwards with all the queries that she's been getting over the last week since she was last with us. So the floor is yours, Hema.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So what I want to look at first of all is I want to think about, as a business, you're looking to actually return to work. You know, the easing of the lockdown restrictions has started to sort of escalate quite strongly. A lot of companies are looking or have returned to work. So the things that you need to think about as a business when you're actually looking at returning to work is we've got employment law. We've then got the new revised directions and guidance which are specific to the coronavirus situation. What you can't forget is your duty of care and all the law that existed before this crisis, that still exists. So if something isn't covered by furlough or the coronavirus crisis, you need to definitely revert back to law. The key things that you need to be thinking about when you're looking at your return to work program is it necessary and is it essential? That's the first thing. The second thing is what I'm doing or thinking of doing sufficiently safe? Not only for me, but for my business and for my staff and any visitors, etc., that may be coming into the workplace. And thirdly, and this is very important and an awful lot of companies forget about this side of it, is are these arrangements mutually agreed? And what I would recommend is that you have a paper trail and documentation throughout this whole process when you're agreeing and discussing with staff about their return to work. One of the key things that we have to remember, the guidance is still stay and work at home if possible. Only if you can't do that do you then go back into work. So an awful lot of people who can work from home, like ourselves today, who can set up on a laptop, etc., and work from home, that should be continued and encouraged. And businesses shouldn't be looking to actually force people back sooner than necessary. A couple of things that you do need to think about. You need to have clear dialogue with your employees. The communication between employer and employee is paramount, and make sure you keep a log throughout this whole process. There's been an awful lot of talk about staff surveys and things like that. What I would say is take note of what other people are saying and suggesting, etc., but do what's right for you. Don't cut corners, don't play lip service to the process, make sure you do the right thing, but do what's right for you. If you've got a team of 4 people and people are saying you need to do a survey, you need to do this, you need to do that, and then you realistically go, well, there's 4 of us, we could technically do a quick Zoom chat and agree everything, record it and sign it, that would be enough. Don't think you've got to go into a great big process for no reason. Don't time waste, no one's got time. Think outside the box. So in terms of what we did before lockdown may not be appropriate for what you do now. So think outside the box and think, okay, I'm going to trial this. If it doesn't work, we'll go back to the drawing board. You need to be flexible. You need to be able to adapt. You've also got to think about anything that you as a company do. You've got to balance this out between the business needs and your work relationship with the employees. You've got to remember your employees are the backbone of your business's success as well. Okay, so you don't want disgruntled staff. You will get a few, there will always be those, but in the majority of cases, you need to be able to say to staff, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it. We need you to buy into this with us so that we can rebuild, restructure, and make this business back to what we were like. Okay. Have to think about mental well-being, health. There will be people who have struggled and continue to struggle through this whole process. For lots of different reasons, and you've got to be mindful of the impact of this whole situation that's affected people. It would be good for you to actually have an open door policy and encourage your staff to actually talk to you so that you can come to some kinds of agreements. I myself have done this with some staff members myself, where we've had to adapt things to accommodate them. It's not going to help if we're just saying, no, not doing it because I've never done it. Doesn't achieve anything. You've then got to think about, when you're looking at easing people back to work in the workplace, or even adapting how they work, is what are the reasons why people are saying or may say why they're not able to come back? Are they shielding? The rules for people that are shielding have been relaxed, but very slightly. They are still very much a vulnerable group, and you really don't want to be pushing them to get back into the workplace. If they can carry on working from home, then that's brilliant, but you really shouldn't be trying to encourage them and forcing them to come back into a warehouse or a factory environment. You'll then have those that are just trying and putting it on, definitely, and we've got to be able to wheedle those out and be able to challenge them effectively. And we link that back to law, okay? So we substantiate it. We don't just say it, we make sure there's objectivity to it. But then there will also be those who genuinely are fearing because of the coronavirus situation. Again, that goes back to the mental health situation. There'll be those that have got situations where childcare, they're looking after a vulnerable person. I know of people who have actually brought their elderly relatives out of care homes back into their own homes because of the fear of the situation in the care home. So these people now are actually the main carers or something like that. So we need to talk to the staff and see if we can work things around. Schools are an absolute nightmare right now. I mean, nobody knows whether you're coming or going. And those that are allowed to go back to school, a lot of parents don't want to send the children, or the schools are saying it's only open between this hour and this hour, and you know that doesn't fit in with normal working life. So think about those sort of situations. It's all about being fair and being reasonable. Another factor you've got to think about, and this really extends, and this is probably where you need to seek advice, because you sort of need to have the HR, the legal brain, in order to be able to adapt to this sort of question, because it is very complicated. And through our training, we probably think like most people don't think, to be fair. Is about the disability side of things or potential discrimination. If I give you an example, we want people to come back to work. We know that we can accommodate it, blah, 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 all the rest of it. However, we've got certain individuals who are actually saying, I can't come back because I've got this situation. In particular, we all know that a disproportionate number of single parents are females. So if we've got females who have got childcare reasons and they can't actually come back to work, if we then force them to come back into work, the fact that they can't rely on any other childcare at the moment, including family, because of the risks, that potentially could be an indirect discrimination claim. And this is why I'm saying, because of the complexities of each individual situation, I would encourage you to take advice before you jump in and try to make a decision and get something wrong. Don't assume. Make sure you know the facts and have this open dialogue with employees. It's so important. Don't be a follower, like I said earlier. And one of the other things that you need to think about are all your health and safety responsibilities as well. Follow the guidelines that have been issued. Make sure you've got your isolation area, etc. So they're the key things. The next thing I want to just briefly touch on, and I know we might go into this in more detail later, is about furlough. So we all know about furlough. It's been in place now for a good few months, that you know, the minimum 3-week period applies, well, 21 days as the law actually says. It is closing to anyone that is being put on furlough, new furlough, from the 10th of June. So that's next Tuesday. So time is running out. We have had an announcement about the flexible furlough scheme. Originally, it was going to commence in August, the 1st of August, but because of feedback, the government have brought it forward to the 1st of July. We've had some guidance in terms of what that might look like or involve, but what we haven't had is the finer detail, and that will be issued on the 12th of June. It won't be out until 5:15, so the first bit of information we really all will have is later on the 12th, and come Monday there'll be an awful lot of activity. The furlough scheme has been extended now until the end of October, and we're led to believe that that will be the end of it. I don't know if the government will take a further review of that, or we've not been told anything. But what we do know is that the flexible furlough scheme, which allows employees to be able to work part of it and furlough payment for the rest of it, that will start from the 1st of July. One of the situations that you still need to be mindful of is employees, with the employer's permission, either through the contract or through a verbal agreement, in this current situation, is that they can go and work for somebody else whilst they're on furlough. The one thing that I would remind you, because now that everyone's actually starting to look at coming back to work, more than happy for staff to do work or volunteers elsewhere, because that's what's actually keeping the economy going. But the employee's got to remember, and the new employer or the new volunteering company have got to remember, that the substantive role actually belongs to X. And when X wants you back to work, you've got to be able to go back to work. So that communication piece needs to happen with the new company as well. And I think a lot of people have forgotten about that side of things. And we're now coming across some difficulties where the employee feels really in the middle, and struggling as to what do I do, how do I do this? So it's just about, again, it's about being open, transparent, and thinking outside the box and thinking about long term, not just the here and now. Another thing that we're coming across an awful lot about are holidays. Now, the message about holidays, what happens, how it happens, etc., that's changed so many times, so there's an awful lot of confusion. The things that we do know, and it's unlikely it's going to change, employees continue to accrue holidays, whether they're on furlough or working, it continues to accrue in line with your contract. Employees are able to take holidays whilst they're on furlough. The difference here is if someone takes holiday, the company has to top up the pay so that they get 100% of their pay for that holiday period. Okay. We have got confirmation, and we've had it several times now, that because of the crisis, the government have agreed that the 4 weeks annual leave can be carried over and taken over the next 2 years. And that's based on your company's holiday year. The only caveat of that is the fact that the person wasn't able to take their holidays because of the coronavirus or the COVID-19 crisis. And I think everybody can sort of point the finger to that. Whether it's because I was on furlough or we were short staffed, so it's all hands on deck, so I didn't have the opportunity to take holidays. Either argument fits under that definition. There is the other one, which a lot of companies are finding it a struggle, but it is doable within reason, is that the employer can actually insist employees take holidays whilst they're on furlough or during this time. But it is harder for companies to be able to encourage or to insist, etc. The only thing that you've got to remember as a business is that you've got to give twice as much notice as the holiday period. So if you want someone to take a week's holiday, you need to give them 2 weeks holiday, 2 weeks notice before they have to take that holiday. One of the things that we found which is most effective for the holiday and the insisting is if you apply the same rules across the board in the business, then there's less reason for anyone to be able to have an argument or to be able to challenge that, and that works quite well. The last thing I want to talk about is the unfortunate situation that we find, and a lot of companies are finding, is lockdown happened, we lost an awful lot of business, some companies can't open, we don't know when we're going to open, especially things like the pub trade, cafes, restaurants, etc. And even those that are looking to open, what they know is we're not going to look, and we certainly don't look like we did before lockdown. It's going to take us a considerable amount of time, 18, 24 months, to be able to get back to where we were. And therefore, we need to look to actually restructure and possibly lose some staff. One thing that we've got to remember is that in this situation, we've got to make sure that we follow employment law, and the usual employment law under the Employment Rights Act would apply here. Okay, so we must ensure that we follow the full redundancy procedure. Meaningful consultation must take place in all cases. There is a little bit of flexibility where someone has got less than 2 years service, but in order to be able to apply an employment review meeting process, which means that you don't have to go through the whole consultation process, you do need to make sure that you're not legally obliged through your own policies or your contracts to actually go through a full process. So again, I would say you need to check your documentation and seek advice before you take any action. In terms of the redundancy procedure, you do have to do the consultation process. So where you're making less than 20 people redundant, there actually isn't a legal minimum in terms of how long that procedure should take place. There is, however, case law, and there is the fair process. So a tribunal will never tell you how to run your business, but it will look for a fair and reasonable process. And case law has shown us that tribunals will say or consider a minimum of 2-week consultation as a fair process. And in that period, you've got to be able to show that there have been several meaningful consultation meetings during that time. If you're making 20 to 99 people redundant, then there is a statutory 30-day consultation period. And if you're making 100 or more, then it's a 45-day consultation period. And with both of the two latter ones, you need to inform the government about that. So you need to complete a HR1 form. In terms of dismissals, etc., you've got to remember a redundancy where someone loses their job, that means that that's a dismissal in law. So you've got to be able to show that that dismissal is fair and reasonable. And that's why I would say that you definitely do need to take some advice and to structure it before you jump straight in to do this process, because if you don't get the preparation correct, the rest of the process will fall apart. And we're seeing a lot of that where companies have jumped straight in, presented it in such a way to the employee where they feel is appropriate, and then the employee challenges it and we've had to walk away again to say we'll need to revisit this. So we don't want to be in that situation. We're playing with people's lives and we really don't want to make it any more difficult than what it already is. So that covers off all the different areas that I wanted to talk about. I'll hand it over now to Jacquie, who can take the advice further. Thank you, Jacquie.
Thank you. Garry, I want to come back on first on that.
Sorry, what did you say?
Is there anything you want to come back on first before I start to look at the questions?
There are 3 or 4 things there that I think we've discussed over the weeks. I mean, the holiday one has been banging about for the full period, really. I mean, we've had a number of our members who are saying that the employers, their clients, are asking advice on holidays, because if they are, say, split 50-50 with some furloughed, some actually working, we understood that under the rules as they were, that furloughed people could hold their holiday over for up till next year, into next year, because basically there's nowhere to go, and being furloughed on holiday or off holiday doesn't seem to make a lot of difference. But those are people who were working were still being told they had to take their holidays in line with the normal employment policy. So where the problem was coming was that the working people were saying, well, hold on a minute, those furloughed people are sitting at home doing nothing. They're holding their holidays over till next year when everybody's going to be able to fly to Spain again. Meanwhile, I work my fingers to the bone for you, and then you force me to sit at home and twiddle my thumbs. Is that basically what the law is saying, or do you seem to give some hope that no, good?
No, it's not. And I think what you're saying is probably something that the holiday situation was like at the beginning, and that's why it's changed. So this is where, because I've had the same question about the carryover of the holidays. In fact, that question was raised with me back end of last week, and so I've researched it. The rules are very clear that if as a result of COVID-19 you're unable to take your holidays this year, then you can carry them over and take the 4 weeks over the next 2 years. What it doesn't say is if you're on furlough as a result of COVID, it applies in that situation. It's quite broad, and therefore it leaves it open to interpretation. So I would say for those that are working, if you think about it, if you've put an awful lot of people on furlough and then there's a few people that are working, they're going to be incredibly stressed and under a lot of pressure to continue to work. So even if they did take holiday or time away, it's probably going to cause more stress and anxiety because they're dreading what they're going to come back to, etc. And whether anyone can go away abroad, etc., is irrelevant, because holiday is about time away from work to rest and recuperate. It doesn't mean you have to be on holiday or go away somewhere. So the rules did change partway through, where someone on furlough can also take holiday. The only difference is that the company would have to top up their pay for those particular days, 100%. Okay. Why I was saying you need to apply the same rule consistently across your staff members, but furloughed and unfurloughed staff. It's not fair to force non-furloughed staff.
No. Okay. One more before I think we'll open up some questions and see what's coming through on the questions from our listeners. And that is, if a person normally wants to work from home, one of the things you have to do is go through a health and safety risk assessment of their home. This all happened rather quickly, and everybody shot off overnight into their homes and working. It certainly happened with ICB. I mean, overnight we picked up our phones and disappeared off. Now, over the last couple of weeks, we've had a couple of our members are saying, you know, their backs aren't quite fitting as they were. So some of them have been in and picked up their chairs from work, or others have bought something new, etc. Given this is an unusual crisis, I mean, is there any allowance for us saying, well, we didn't get a chance to go and do a risk assessment, we're relying upon the member, or we all still culpable?
Yeah, no, there is. I think the longer this goes on, the harder the argument is going to get. However, the DSE and the health risk assessments, etc., is for something which is going to be long-term and pre-planned. And like you say, the majority of people went into work on Wednesday, and come Thursday, they didn't come back in. You know, it's as quick as that. So yeah, there are some allowances. However, as a business, you do have a duty of care. So you do need to make sure that your staff have got the means and the tools to be able to do it. So if a staff member does require something, you would need to consider that. However, it's also within reasonableness that you would look to make those adjustments.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for that. Let's just have a quick look at the questions and see what's coming up. Right.
I want to go through them because I've been looking at them. Okay. Quickly, Faye's come back. Hi, Faye. That's quite a detailed one that we have spoken about before. That's all to do with pay dates and periods and claiming SSP. So I think what I'll do with that, Faye, if you leave that with me, I'll copy the question and I'll come back to you after. I think that's going to take a bit longer to think through that one than we can get it today. Judith's with us. Hi, Judith. If you can't get furlough money grant, what is the minimum furlough payment? I think that depends on why you can't get the grant, Judith, because if Hema, supposedly if for whatever reason you can't get a furlough grant because the employees didn't fall within the relevant dates, i.e. they weren't on the RTI before the 19th of March, and we've had a few cases of these. Presumably there is no minimum payment, and you have to go through the legal side of laying them off temporarily, making them down, but it has to be done legally and within the confines, with the constraints of the employer's contract, doesn't it?
Yeah, most definitely. It literally is a case of it applies or it doesn't. And if it doesn't apply, then normal law applies. Layoff, short time working, you can only really apply that if one, it's in your contract, or if it's not in your contract, the employee agrees to it.
Yeah, and I think that's, we've been saying that from the start, so it's great to have it. But I have to say, it's great to know that most of what I've been saying for the past 6 weeks, you've backed up. I'm really pleased about that.
We've never doubted it.
Sorry?
We've never doubted it.
Oh, well, I have on occasion.
Just asking one there about rotating furlough. Are you people moving around and swapping?
With employees on a rotating furlough, does it matter if they want to return part-time work in July that they might not be on furlough between the 10th and the 30th of June? And there's some more there about the dates. I think the 10th of June is the last date by which you can furlough a new employee that's never been furloughed before, because the scheme closes as it is now on the 30th of June and a new scheme opens on the 1st of July. So to get them onto furlough by the 30th of June, the last date you can furlough them is the 10th, and then you have your minimum 3-week period to pay them the furlough. And then from the 1st of July, it more or less rolls on to a weekly basis, because the new contract, I think, is a minimum of a week. But I will say now that that is the guidance as I understand it at the moment. And as I've said time and time again, that may well change by Monday. But as I understand it at the moment, it's a weekly rolling basis. So as long as they have been furloughed before the 10th of June and are, whether or not they're on furlough on the 30th, I don't think matters. If you furloughed them once, you can furlough them again and you can bring them back on a part-time basis. Is that how you read it, Hema?
That's exactly how we read it at this time, yeah.
So, yes, the answer to that, Linda, is yes, you can furlough them after the 1st of July because they've been furloughed before the 10th of June. Now, can I just say, if you haven't seen it, we've just put an article up on the website in news. At the moment it's the top one, and what I've done is I've gone through a brief explanation about how we think this is going to work, and I've actually given an example of how to calculate part-time furlough pay. It's very simplistic, but at least it gives you an idea of how these percentages are going to work out. So if you've got questions on percentages, can I ask you to read the article first and then come back with an email to member services, and then they'll pass it to me, and either Hema, or if it's the legal side, or I will answer those. Terry's back. Terry, this is one that cropped up last week, and I spoke to Terry about this on Monday. If people on the contracted furlough are getting an amount of money currently on furlough, but when they're being brought back to work, I think this particular case is a small cafe where social distancing for the staff is difficult and the staff are concerned about going back. What happens, Hema, if they can say come back, but they don't feel safe? This is what you said before about having to be in agreement.
Yes, that's right. At this moment in time, if there is a genuine reason why the person cannot or won't come back, we've got to consider it. On the flip side, if the business or the company have done everything they possibly can in order to actually protect the staff, social distancing, PPE, etc., and there's no real reason, then the employee's got a weaker argument to challenge that and say no. It's about finding a middle ground and understanding what the fears or the concerns are of the staff member.
I think also that the question from Terry, and we've had this a few times, a person's average salary is taken, they get their £500 a month or whatever it might be. The business is then told it can reopen, obviously under COVID restrictions. The employer wants the people to come back, but he's not going to be paying them as much as they were when they were on furlough. But he can't run the business without them.
No, this is something we've had loads of queries about, Hema, and this is 0 hours contracts. Because we worked out how to do the furlough payments, but in fact, with the way it's worked out, that actually they've probably been better off on furlough than they might have been if they'd been working their standard 0 hours contracts, because they might have had a good month last year, so their flexible pay is higher for this month. So what we've been looking into, and in Terry's case, is, for example, let's say they can bring them back for 2 days a week, whether or not they feel safe and they come back, but they can't afford to pay the furloughed wage once we have to start making the contributions, because they're not going to have the income. Yes. If they're on a 0 hours contract, can we bring them back part-time, but actually not furlough them and just say, you're back at work, but these are the hours we've got for you? And I think this is something that's going to crop up again and again.
I think for that answer, you would need to look at the actual work relationship pre-crisis. The reason being, often what happens is somebody is placed on a 0 hour contract. When you actually look at the actual activity, they weren't a 0 hour employee. They actually were a part-time employee because they had regular hours. Week in, week out, they worked regularly, and therefore there's an argument from them to say, well, actually, I'm a part-time employee and I'm contracted to work 12 hours a week. That type of argument.
And that's because that's what they've been averaging every week for the last.
That's right. Yeah, it becomes custom. It's a custom and practice, and then it becomes an implied term.
Okay, that's interesting, and we're so glad we've got you on here, Hema. Yeah, this is the bit we've struggled with, or I've struggled with, is the employment regulation side and how this works. So that might impinge on the discussion I had with Terry earlier this week on whether the 0 hours contract and the terms and the normal conditions for that particular employee work.
Mm.
Do you want to start scrolling through these, Jackie, because they're mounting up on them? Which is good.
Furlough calculations, Linda. Furlough calculations in the past have been paid on a 7-day calculation based on a period of 30 or 31 days. All examples I have seen in paying part-time in July has been calculated based on a 5-day period. Has it changed from 7 days to 5 days? Is that an answer, Hema, where we're not quite sure until we see the guidance on the 12th as to what the calculator is going to do?
At this moment in time, we have very little information.
As I say, I agree, we won't know until the details come out on the 12th and we have a look at the new calculator, which I think might be coming out, being released around about the same time. So as soon as that happens, we can start to put some experimental calculations in. Faye says she has a client who isn't sure if he can afford the employee in August. Can he do a short-term week, say 2 days work and furlough for 3 days? Well, yes, you can. Actually, funny enough, that's the example I've given in there where they come back for 2 days a week and a furlough for 3 days. You work out the amount of furlough to pay. But once we get into August, September and October, the employer is paying an increasing amount. It's pension and NICs in August. It's that plus 10% of the furloughed wage in September, and it's that plus 20% in October. If this doesn't work and they then do the redundancy through September and October, one of the questions we've had, Hema, that you can sort of linked into this is, are we right in saying that if you do decide to put somebody on a redundancy notice, because the coronavirus, the CJRS, is to keep people in work, if you start to negotiate a redundancy, you can't furlough them?
No, because the furlough situation, that's where you're trying, well, where we've got no work or you know, we're trying to avoid redundancies, etc. So if it's appropriate, you can furlough them, but you can, while someone's on furlough, you can start and you can commence and you can even dismiss someone for redundancy as long as you can show that it's a genuine redundancy situation.
So if you are going through the legal processes and you're doing everything as you should be, you can still claim furlough for them in, say, their notice period?
Yes, you can for their notice period, and you would then need to top it up to 100%. What furlough won't cover is the statutory redundancy pay or the holiday.
Okay, but if they're on that, you can claim the 80%, but if they're in that notice period, you have to pay them the full amount. So there is that top up.
Yes, and what you've got to remember is that their employment has to end at the end of the notice period, because if you say it's payment in lieu, then furlough only pays for an employee whilst they're in employment. So the company would have to pay the notice pay in lieu. So what you do is you make their end date at the end of the notice period.
Of the notice period.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've had a few queries from our members where employers are trying to get our members to agree to sort of part-time furloughing, 2 days on, 3 days off, but actually the employers are still working for the full week. Now, we've had a lot of queries on this, and we're putting in reports at the moment to HMRC or to whoever because they can't do it. And I had a case this morning where one of our members was saying that a client she's worked with for about 15 or 16 years called a fascist yesterday because she wouldn't agree to put somebody on furlough that was actually working full time. We are coming under a lot of pressure as bookkeepers at the moment. And our members are fighting back, but you know, to be called a fascist by a company you've worked with for, I think she said 13 years, something or other. Yeah, it's not nice out there for some people. So, you know, we're getting a lot of these calls.
That's very, very tough, and that's really wrong as well. I mean, basically, they've got every right to whistleblow because that's what this would be. But the rules are very clear And it's wrong of the company to do that, but I totally appreciate these people are in a really difficult position, aren't they?
Yeah, and I mean, basically, I think they want us to say, oh, all right, just do it, and then put in a report afterwards. But then you've taken part in an illegal act. So it's a quandary that bookkeepers are in a number of times. As Jackie, I'm sure you'll agree, we've had these queries before.
Oh, yeah.
But I
almost from
just
at the start of the week, until they sorted out whether a director could be furloughed, we were getting an awful lot of sole directors queries on whether they can be furloughed, can they go back and change their pay, and so they're paying more, so they can people on minimum salary and high dividends, which caused quite a lot of consternation at the start of the period.
Well, they were happy to reap the rewards at the time when it suited them, weren't they?
Absolutely.
I've got a lot of criticisms for that. Helen Rice has an interesting one. How do we deal with having to go to a client as a bookkeeper? What are the coronavirus precautionary obligations clients must provide me as a bookkeeper, especially if their office is in or at their home?
It doesn't matter what position you hold in a business, the same rules apply. If you're being asked to go into the workplace, I would go back to the 3 things that I talked about at the beginning. Is it essential? Is it sufficiently safe? And is it mutually agreed? Why do I need to go into someone's office? Can I not do it remotely? Is the question. And if I do need to have access to some information, can that actually be sent to me, or can I just pick it up and then I'll go away and do the work? That's the sort of thing that I would be looking at. We need to think outside of the box. People can't instruct people to just come in because that's what we've always done.
Right.
Nicola's asking about rotational furlough and dates, and I think as she's asking about furloughing on a rotational basis, which we've agreed works as long as you have a minimum 3-week time every time they come back to work. They've been on the scheme before, but not as of the 10th of June. As long as they have been on the scheme, then regardless whether they're furloughed on the 10th of June or not, doesn't matter, does it, Hema? Because as long as because basically this is when you make the CJRS claim, you're actually identifying the individuals that you're claiming for, because you have to put the name and the national insurance number in. So if you've got a record of them on the furlough grant, then you are okay to carry them on, even if they're not being furloughed at the moment. It's just that if you have someone who has maybe been working right up till now and you suddenly want to furlough them, you can't put them on furlough after the 10th of June for the first time. And there's a quick question in from Barry about top up and notice, pay notice. Yes, I think we've answered that, Barry. So that if you do go through the legal processes for making them redundant and holidays, then if they're in that process, then you will have to top them up to the 100%. I think Hema covered that last time. Oh, sorry, Faye's come back on her very first question that I said I would cover. It's to confirm HMRC say that the pay date is the date where tax and NI is applicable, not the pay period. That goes right back to when we had Ian and Claire in, I think almost in week 1 or week 2, when we were talking about the difference between the pay period and the pay date. So hopefully that answers that one.
Have details of the revised furlough scheme, percentages, employers' contributions, timescales. That's on the hub, isn't it, Jackie?
Yes, it's on the hub. I put an article up on that, Lee. If you want to have a quick look at the article, then we'll be getting some more information. It's not actually on the COVID hub yet, because I just wanted to get a quick answer article out, but we'll get the COVID hub on the website updated certainly by Monday.
And Sean asks, what is normal pay after redundancy when someone is already on furlough? Is that what they were on prior to furlough?
Yes, so that's their basic remuneration.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Dilip says, a one-man limited company director has been asked to shield due to underlying conditions for 12 weeks. Can we claim furlough for him for the period of 12 weeks or statutory sick pay? So if someone is shielding, I think, am I right, they can furlough themselves if they can be furloughed if they're shielding.
Yep.
That have to be on statutory sick pay.
Yeah.
That came in about a third of the way through the period, didn't it? Where it became clear that if you are shielding, then you can be furloughed. So it will be the furlough calculations, not statutory sick pay.
So, I mean, Dylan then says, or on the SSP, where we've had that one. What happens if the person who's shielding then catches coronavirus? Hopefully he doesn't, but can he just sort of say, well, I'm still on furlough, I'm going to be ill during furlough, or should he hold his hand up and go into SSP?
It really depends on what they want to do. It could be sickness, because in some situations, sickness pay might be better. But yeah, there's no reason why they can't remain on furlough.
Right.
But of course, with statutory sick pay, you can only claim back the first 14 days, because after that, you can't claim back anything longer than 14 days. Because the fact that statutory sick pay can no longer be reclaimed, it's a special thing for statutory sick pay under COVID-19. Because the 14 days was is the self-isolating period, after which, if you're healthy, you can go back to work. So you cannot reclaim back SSP for longer than 14 days.
Okay. Now, a couple of things that I've come up across, if one of you can answer this: childcare and furloughing. Now, obviously, we're coming back to the stage now where childcare may be available in certain circumstances, particularly I know some people who made the inquiry have got sort of live-in help, who then their nanny or whoever went back home or did whatever. Now they're getting over that, they're coming back. If you are an employer, do you have to go through some sort of test so that the person doesn't decide, well, I'm going to sit at home and be paid because I'm actually enjoying being at home with my children and I'm not really going to look very hard for childcare? Or is that's a question that we've had from Mike Sims, who is an employer himself, and he's just saying he thinks that he's got a couple of his staff that are currently off at the moment with this in this situation. Because
of the childcare issues.
Yeah, and now that childcare is actually coming back, and this is the person who's getting the childcare. Yes,
it is. Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult at the moment, and this is where the open dialogue would really come in, because we do know that an awful lot of the childcare provisions aren't open, and a lot of them have said that they have no intention of opening until September, and we still have the same rules that you can. In England anyway, you can meet up with other people up to 6 in an open space and but the rules in terms of the elderly and being our normal childcare, etc., that still doesn't apply because they're still seen as a vulnerable group.
I mean, we've had a lot of inquiries through a lot of our members do the books for early years nurseries. And we've actually set up a focus group, and we've had a number of meetings and emails going backwards and forwards about how to claim for nurseries when they're getting part funding from the government anyway, from the authorities. And we've come to an agreement by talking to various people about how that's going to work. How that's going to work when it becomes flexible is another thing. And I think I've said I will reconvene another meeting so we can have a talk about early years and what happens if the business is getting funding from the government. But that's the other side of the coin. That's what's happening in the nurseries that maybe don't feel safe to bring back the children. And then on our side, we've got parents who either can't or don't want to send their children back. And of course, the situation with the schools at the moment, it's year 1 and year 6. The year 6 seems to be going back on a part-time basis. Year 1 and reception is very up in the air at the moment, isn't it? So especially if you've got children in both camps, it's not easy at all.
No, this is it. The one thing that the companies could think about, depending on the position, obviously, is if the person has childcare issues, could they actually do some work at different times? It doesn't have to be normal office hours. Could they do weekends or evenings when a partner is at home and they can do the childcare? So these are the sort of things that you can talk about through the dialogue and come to some kind of agreement, and there may be a way forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's compound it if you're a single parent, but yes, I agree with you. It's still got to be done in negotiation, hasn't it?
Yes.
I mean, we have Zoom meetings between our team, and we've got 2 of our team members who are constantly joined by their children. But it's one of those things that I think we've just got used to. You know, I mean, sometimes it slows down a bit, but other times it's not the end of the world, and we get on with it and we live with it. And one of the areas that I've had a lot of questions about so far is the whole mental health and well-being. It's difficult enough when you're working with somebody to think that they're on the edge. How do you keep an eye on what's going on when they're remotely working? Sometimes you can, you know, they might lose it on a Zoom meeting or something. But I mean, how do you allow for that? You know, how do you expedite your health and well-being policies as far as an employer when you've got no real control over what's coming back if you're asking questions and you can't see people as well?
That's the thing, it's incredibly difficult. However, these sort of tools, video conferencing, they're the ideal type of situation, and try to have one-to-one meetings with them, regular intervals. Sometimes you've got to wait for them to come to you. But if you're aware that someone has or does suffer from mental health or well-being issues, then you do need to be taking positive actions to be there and to support them. And sometimes it's just a matter of saying, I'm here if I need you, or understanding before they actually go into an episode or something, you need to ring me or let me know so I can help and guide you. There's no easy answer with that situation. It's really tough, but we've just got to try and make the best of what we can.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's covered a few of the things that we're getting asked more and more by email. Not necessarily, it may be that it's something that they're too embarrassed to ask on something like this anyway, which we all always know about. Jacquie, have you got anything else to add on your Thank Furlough It's Friday?
No, I mean, the big one is the announcement this week of the flexible scheme. There's a second grant available for the self-employed. That's payable out in August, and the final date, this is a question that came up before, how long do, particularly geared into our members, this one, is there a deadline date for the claim of the first grant? The deadline is the 13th of July. So everyone who's listening, we've had a long conversation about a number of our members have been really busy and have not actually been impacted maybe the first month because they were busy, but they may be impacted in the future. And we've talked about the ethical nature of the declaration that you have to make that your business has been impacted by COVID-19 when you make the application for the SACE grant. And we've discussed that at length, but the deadline for that is now the 13th of July. So if you don't put your claim in by the 13th of July, for the first 3 months, March, April and May, you will not be able to claim. June, July and August, I think it is, there is a claim in August for it, and they've dropped it from 80% to 70% with a maximum, I think it's gone down from 2,500 to something like 1,850 that you can claim, and the calculations have already been done. So if you've got the 80% grant through for the first 3 months, you will get a similar grant, but taken down to 70% for the second grant. So that's to bring it in line with the CJRS scheme. I'm sure that next week there will be a lot of detail coming out. As I say, it's next Friday, so probably it could be Monday week before we can get too much out for you. And I think, Hema, you are going to get quite a lot of legal queries coming through over the next few weeks, because basically I think what's going to happen is that as employers move through August, September and October, if they're not actually starting to build their income and they're struggling to cover the extra salary and wage costs, then I think there's going to be a big impact then. And I think this is where a lot of these redundancy notices and discussions about what's going to happen is going to click in if the businesses suddenly realise that actually we can't afford to pay. Don't forget, if you're paying your NICs from the 1st of August, those small companies that have got the employer's allowance will be able to claim their employer's allowance, which is £4,000 for this year. You'll have to pay employer's pension costs from the 1st of August. But if you're talking about lowly paid staff, then they may not be up to the threshold anyway. But for those who have got significant wage costs, yeah, it could be a fair amount of money that they're going to have to find. And that, I think, is going to have an impact.
I think we're already seeing that coming through, because as soon as it was announced, companies have started to work things out financially, and they realise that even that initial change will have a major impact on them, and they can't afford it.
And I mean, we've seen this in some fairly major companies that are announcing that they're laying staff off already. So if it's happening for the big boys, it's going to be even worse for the small and medium-sized enterprises that have not yet got back to work.
Mm.
Can I just raise a sort of a housekeeping point, which is a message for our own team as well as for the people who are listening. Some people, when they're coming on and they're asking for legal advice, don't necessarily want legal advice. So I've noticed from one of the questionnaire things here that we get, the list of questions being asked from Quest, some people are asking questions which have nothing to do with Quest, but it's the way people phrase things. So if we are very happy for you all to use our legal service, but a number of people have said, I want to know my legal position over COVID. They don't actually mean their legal position. They want to know how much can be claimed, etc., etc. Well, that is actually a technical thing as far as we're concerned. So we've got a team of technical people who will answer that. If you want to know whether you can make somebody redundant, then again, that is probably Quest, because that is a legal thing. It's HR, and we specialise in, at the end of the day, bookkeeping. And I noticed on here, somebody rang up to see which exam they do now they've done their A1, A2 and A3. That's not really a legal thing. That should be handled by our education department. Now, whether or not that's one of our team that's misunderstood what's being asked there, or they've just got it wrong, or whether it's the way the question was phrased, I'm not honestly sure. But I had an experience of picking up some calls the other night when some people were on having a group meeting, so I answered some of the calls. And sometimes the questions that you ask are not necessarily the real question that you want to ask, but I'm old enough and stupid enough to know that if I ask another question, I get a completely different answer. So we are going to step it up a little bit with our team, just to make sure that they don't take the first question as being the or guiding thing, because Quest are getting a lot of calls from us at the moment, and no problems with that, but it's best if we use them for what they're good at. And I think I don't know what your team tell you, Hema, whether what they think of the bookkeepers. Are we a pretty good client? Do you get some interest?
Fabulous.
Yeah, fabulous. You're going to say that, aren't you? Yeah, I know. But, I mean, it's pretty general, the stuff that they're asking, I can see here. I mean, the CIS scheme is very high up there. VAT concerns. Again, that could well be a technical problem, depending on how far it's gone. But a lot of it is personal, a lot of it about pensions, a lot of it about family business and problems. And I've got something here about, should I be a sole trader? But we do work as a team, and you will occasionally throw people back and say this isn't something that we're involved with. But it's quite a good level of query coming through, I think. It shows we've got an active membership, if nothing else.
There's a couple of questions here. One, let's just pick up on the employer's national insurance allowance. Does this mean that the employer's national insurance allowance can be claimed in its entirety from August? One of the questions we've had, Hema, that I don't even know whether you can answer this one, is when throughout the CJRS from April, they were claiming back the national insurance contributions, but if you've got the employer's allowance, you're not actually paying that anyway because you're getting it back. So a lot of the questions we've been asked is, can we defer the start of the employer's allowance to August? Because you're not actually, the government's going to pay the NI anyway, and then start claiming the employer's allowance from the 1st of August. Now, that's something we've struggled with, and we've actually gone back to the software companies, the software payroll companies, to see what they can and can't do on the software. We've bumped that back to the software companies because it's their software that they've had to reprogram to allow them to claim it or not claim it. Do you know anything about that?
I actually can't answer that question. I'm not aware of it.
No. So I think the answer to that one, Anonymous, is can you go back to your payroll company and ask them, and we will try and find an answer. But if you haven't claimed it yet, try it and see. I think question from Margaret. This is one for Hema again. We're having a problem with an administrative department in a school of HE who are now being asked to keep a timesheet to show both times working and what work was accomplished. They've not had to do this previously because they work in the office, and some are threatening to go to the union. Is this timesheet a reasonable request?
I suppose the question is, why are they being asked to do that? Do they know?
I would imagine so that the employers can check that they're actually working at home and not skiving off.
I think that's the thing. If again, it's all about reasonable, isn't it? There's lots of different ways to actually measure productivity and output. And if this is the best and fairest way, then I don't see any reason why not. You know, if you've got nothing to hide, there shouldn't be a problem with it.
I mean, a lot of companies do ask you to complete timesheets. I mean, if you work for someone that does job contracting, then you would have to negotiate, you have to keep a timesheet so you can actually cost your time to complete jobs. So it's not something that nobody else does. But I think it's a trust issue, isn't it?
It is a trust issue, but also from an employer's point of view, it's about visibility and the lack of visibility at this moment in time. And it is really difficult to be able to manage certain roles from a distance. So maybe this is one way that they thought that we can actually manage and coordinate work.
But again, it's a negotiation, isn't it? And an explanation of why they're asking you to do this.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a negotiation, but certainly an explanation. And this is why I always go back to the basics. Dialogue is so important. If people understand what's being asked of them and why, then the comeback is often much more positive.
I've got a query that we got earlier in the week, and actually there wasn't anywhere else to ask it, so I thought I'd hold it to today because it's quite a juicy one. I've got a client, with one of our bookkeepers, who is a garden centre, and they have been closed for some time, slowly opening up now. They furloughed their staff. One of the gentlemen who works for them, meanwhile, got himself a job working in a large warehouse with one of the big distribution companies. So he's getting furlough plus doing work for a distribution company. The garden centre now wants him back, and he's saying, no, I want to stay on furlough because I'm earning double the money I used to get.
No, and this comes back to what I said earlier. His actual contract is with his existing garden company. They've agreed.
Would the law support the employer if he merely says, I've given you notice, if you're not coming back, you are terminated immediately?
Well, this is it. You still have to follow the right process. It depends on length of service as to how you would go about it. But certainly the company's in a strong position here to be able to say, this is a perfectly reasonable request. You are required to return to work. The furlough scheme wasn't introduced so that people could abuse it and make some money out of it. And the fact that they allowed people to start working for someone else really was to help those businesses who desperately needed additional staff, because that was a crisis in itself. It wasn't there to actually abuse it. So no, I think as long as a company follows the right process, they could potentially say thanks and goodbye to the person.
We did have comments in the earlier days about that, where some employers had built into some agreement or contracts that they could go and work elsewhere, but not within the hours that they were of their normal contracted hours. So that if they were required back, they were free to come back. If they then wanted to still work and earn double the money in their own time, that's fine. But they had to be free to be called back to their first job.
Yeah. And that's the key thing here. That was always the intention, is go do something else, keep yourself busy or earn some money, but this is your substantive role.
Yeah, I would presume that the original intention was it for all these 750,000 people who were going to provide voluntary work, but I'm not sure that ever happened. But nonetheless, it was useful. I mean, I think we're as taxpayers, obviously, we're going to have to pay something to get ourselves out of this at the end of all this, and there's probably more trouble on the horizon. There always is, but I think we have to work together to make sure that it remains as a challenge and an opportunity rather than the end of the line. Try and keep it going. And the more positive we can be about this, the better. I think we have to keep telling ourselves that we're going to get.
Margaret's come back with a reply to your answer on the HE admin timesheets. It said, thank you. Dialogue is probably the key here. Absolutely right. And Barry's come back, and we were talking about the employer's allowance, and he said that you can't claim the employment allowance and the CJRS, and it's an ethical issue, and yes, we agree with that. But I would still say in that one, I agree, it is an ethical issue. Some are claiming national insurance, the employer's allowance, and others are claiming it through through the CJRS. So I would go back and talk to your software company still. Garry, there's one for you there on the bookkeeping team, the one at the bottom.
Right, sorry, I'll get back up again. I'm looking out to you.
Kevin, I won't read your comment out loud. I'll let Garry read it and then he can decide whether to answer it online or come back to you.
Hello.
That's something to do with ringing and who can ring.
Yeah, that comes up a lot actually. It's something we're working on, but obviously we have what we call the boom business, beneficial owner of our practices, who are our key contact. And if now you have grown your business to the point where you've got 20 members of staff, we didn't think about this one, to be absolutely honest, but therefore we can't have the position where you've got 20 members of staff all ringing about different things when we don't necessarily have them. Some of the staff won't be members, some will be, and everything. But yeah, we are working on this one. But at the moment, we're expecting everything to come through the senior person. One of the reasons is that very early on when we did this, and we opened up, obviously it's legal advice. It can be about divorces and all sorts of things in there. And some of our members didn't want everybody ringing up about divorces or even about employment matters against the person who is employing them, and therefore, yeah, it's a difficult one, but we are working on it, and there is something coming up in legislation as well over the money laundering regulations about how we moderate you and look after you on that. So we're working on that, and I'm talking weeks rather than months on this, so I'm hoping that will help. And while on the question of money laundering, I must make a call out to Lucy Brown, who has made it her avowed intent that her branch Lincolnshire branch will be the best branch as far as following the money laundering regulations are concerned. So absolutely well done, Lucy. You've always been a great supporter. And the reason I mention that is that I noticed Terry Ram was asking a question earlier. Now, Terry has had an inspection, was found to be compliant, and he has put together a sort of instruction as to what it's like to be inspected and what to do. And I noticed that he and Lucy both went to very great lengths to stress this is not ICB policy, it's what we think, it's our opinion. So thank you very much both for doing that. I'm going to have a look at it actually because, you know, Terry, if you've done something which we can pass on to everybody else, then fine. I wrote something many years ago, but it's not from having had an inspection, so it might be nice to get it from your side as well. Most people regard our inspections as having been positive for them because they learn from it, if nothing else. But you know, I'm glad we didn't catch you out anyway, Terry. That's fine. So,
Usha, come in. Good afternoon, Usha. Nice you're with us again. Has said surely it would be wise to claim the balance of the employer's allowance up to £4,000 from August. Let's just quickly revamp on how that works. If you've been claiming employer's allowance from the 1st of April, then that will carry through. And when you do your RTI, the employer's NIC is uploaded on your RTI as 0 because it's been offset by your employer's allowance. Therefore, you will have used up an amount of your employer's allowance and then will carry on using that from August when you have to pay the employer's national insurance. That will go up. And again, rather than you paying it, if you've run out of your employer's allowance, of course, from August, you will have to start paying it. I think the question was, if you're claiming this through the CJRS, the NI you would have been paying, you've got it back in a grant, and then you carry on and start claiming from August, you're actually getting a more of an allowance than that. So yeah, it's a legal ethical problem that I never did get an answer from my HMRC contact about. Kevin said, thank you for answering his question, Garry.
Great. I think are we coming to the end of the question?
Well, it's a nice one from Faye for you, Garry. After spending last weekend doing the whole Inspire tour, can we now know how many ties were worn during the presentations? I thought 4, but wasn't sure if one tie was worn a second time.
I'm not sure, actually. Yeah, a lot of people have said, look, we have to keep going through his presentation over and over again to see that. And I can't, sorry, I can't remember what the outcome was.
Hema, I should explain at this stage that on Thank Furlough, it's Friday. After about 4:05, the questions do become quite light-hearted because everyone gets really well happy. So we start to get a bit more fun after 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon.
Can I just do a few call outs as well? Those of you who follow what we get up to on Twitter, we have announced now officially that the 16th to 20th of November is Global Bookkeeping Week. We've got a lot to celebrate this year. Obviously, Bookkeeping has been doing a very great job of keeping the show on the road. I've got a lot of people lined up. We're going to be doing a lot of things during that week. We may or may not have a physical conference on the Monday and Tuesday. We are really hedging our bets at the moment, but we'll certainly have a conference of one form or another, so that's the summit. And on the Wednesday, it's the Razor Cup Day, and Hema, every year for the last sort of 10 years, on the middle Wednesday of that particular week, we raise the cup to bookkeepers and all the work they've done. This year, I have to say to everybody listening, it is going to be a major celebration of everything that bookkeepers have done. So I want your staff to be raising a cup, you'd be raising a cup, your mums, dads, dogs, cats, employees, employers, clients, everybody, because, you know, you are great unsung heroes here. And judging by some of the things I mentioned earlier, some of the battles you've had with your clients and with your clients, accountants and advisors and everything else, you deserve your day. And we can't clap you every Thursday because somebody else got in the way and took that one. So we're going to have Wednesday, the 18th of November. So get ready for that. We're looking at T-shirts, we're looking at badges and various things that will be available shortly for you. And just keep an eye out. We're going to go big on that one this year. And we've already got people from New Zealand right the way through to, at the moment, I think Bali or somewhere other, right over on the other side is the last one. So, because, you know, we have had a tough year. Having said that, some of our members are coping with even bigger things than COVID at times. You know, I mean, we've got some students and members out in the Bahamas, and you always think, wow, great, it must be nice to be in the Bahamas, all that lovely weather. They've just come back from a totally devastating hurricane. We've got the Philippines that had a hurricane followed by a flood, you know, and this sort of stuff is happening year round. Because we cover 140 countries, there's always somebody having a problem and somebody having a good time. But we're going to celebrate you. That's what it's all about. So we want you to celebrate you too.
Right. Sorry, Garry, can I just interrupt? I think we've got one last technical question, and I think we'll possibly call it a day because it's technical. This, again, is one for Hema. We've had this cropped up before, Hema, and it's actually quite a valid one for seasonal workers. Can an employer withdraw a job offer on the basis of current difficulties, which was made and accepted before COVID-19, but the start date was to be July?
Yes.
That's what we thought. Yeah.
The only thing that you would have to think about, as from a company's point of view, is do you owe any notice? So typically there wouldn't be any notice in the first 4 weeks of service. However, you need to double check what's in the contract and comply with that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Hopefully that answers.
Yeah, I think some people say a week within the first 13 weeks or something or other, so that you don't think you're going to get thrown immediately. So yeah, as you say, I mean, I think Hema, it's been great to have you on. You did a brilliant presentation. I think you've answered a lot of questions, and you've certainly filled in a few of the gaps that Jackie and I have been hedging our bets over for a little while. But I think the big message I get from you is it's all about negotiation. It's about conversation. It's about getting things done that both sides are happy with, or all sides are happy with. And I mean, would you like to give us a parting shot before we wish you a good weekend and let you off to carry on your legal advice?
Yeah, I just think that, you know, it's so difficult for everybody right now, but we've just got to be reasonable and rational and keep going. You know, we will all get through this positively. Yeah,
well done. Jackie, anything from you before you?
No, not from me. I've had quite a lot of technical queries this week. I've cleared most of them today. So if you haven't heard back this week from your COVID-19 technical queries, they are on their way to you. I cleared them all down this morning. We'll be back next week with any updates. I'll update the COVID-19 hub by Monday, hopefully. And I think there's one last question for you, Garry, from Barry, and I'm not even going to read that one out. The answer is yes or no.
Barry. Am I looking forward to getting my haircut? I am, actually. I mean, look at this stuff. I mean, I was due to have my haircut about 3 weeks before we went into lockdown. I didn't go. My barber got ill, nothing to do with coronavirus. I've said this before. I haven't worked it out, actually. I think it must be about 18 weeks since I've had my haircut. Apparently, I've got another 4 to go yet. So, yeah, I've been toying with the idea of an elastic band and a ponytail, but I don't want to go quite that far, and we'll see. So, no, we will try. And Margaret Crawford says, thank you so much. Have a lovely weekend. Well, Margaret, thank you for joining in again. We're only here because we've got people who are listening to us. And don't forget, if you missed anything or you want to go over it again, or you're just a real glutton for punishment, you can download this. It is on Facebook, it's on YouTube. And it's lovely to see that although we get, you know, varies in numbers, but look how many we've got today, 100 some odd. Then we get more coming through Facebook, which don't appear on our screen anyway, so I never know till afterwards. But the number of downloads is regularly over 1,000. So, you know, we're reaching all of the corners that other bookkeeping organisations don't reach, I'd like to say. So we're very pleased about this. And I'd like to thank my 2 lovely lady guests again for all their help, and wish you all a great weekend. It's apparently not going to be a bit wet and windy and a bit of thunder and lightning and everything, but stay well, stay healthy, and we'll see you next week. Bye all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, bye.